Hello, hello. Get this a little bit more straight. Maybe. There we go. Hey. So, spicy title here for some of you. Feeling this? Right? I was talking with a woman the other day, and she was describing this of like, I have lost all of my influence in my word. I don't have any ability to like help or be cooperative because I've been labeled the word heretic, right? And this happens in ward families. It happens in families, right? It happens in marriages. It happens in all sorts of relationships, right? And it's probably one of the most difficult things to one experience and then to try and navigate, right? I've had multiple experiences over the last decade of my life of having many different types of labels like that, of being the heretic, of being the one who was ruining my life, my family's life, being deceived, being right, all the things coming, right? Did you see that? That was like my little turn of like, I need some sort of sensory object still a little bit to talk about some of these things. Because it leaves a mark, right? And it's hard to try and even accurately put into words what it's like going through that experience if you haven't gone through it. Right? It's a very, I kind of want to say unique problem in that it feels like it goes after one of the core things that robs a woman of her power, which is the belief that she can trust herself. Inside my programs, my coaching, I teach about the masculine and feminine journeys of this process we go through. We start in different places. We end up in the same place as like full and complete person. And that journey for the feminine is one of she starts connected to others and she has to learn to connect to herself and then how to trust herself and then bring that back into her relationships with others. And that first wave out, right, from connecting to others, and I have to connect to myself. And sometimes that process involves disconnecting from others in order to be able to connect to yourself, and then moves into being able to trust yourself, right? And that can feel like it's the completion of the journey, but it's only half the wave, right? The wave then has to bounce back, right? And that return journey is now, can I connect to myself from that place of trust? And that final step is, can I connect to others while maintaining that connection to myself and maintaining that trust in myself, right? And so it again has this appearance that when you're in that second half of the journey that you're going backwards, right? And that's where a lot of women start to get nervous the more they actually progress in their journey, because, and they sort of get in their own way in a way, because they don't want to go back to where they were before, and it feels like they're headed back. And so oftentimes what they're trying to do in this, I want to get to a place of connecting with others, but I don't want to give up the sense of trust with myself, right? They're trying to kind of go back this way to it, right? And so they're going against the current, against the path. And one of the things that I always say in energetics is when we start to experience resistance, when there is that feeling of the harder you try, the worse it gets, it means something's off in what you're doing and the energy, right? They're not lined up with each other. They're going against one another. And so you need to either change the energy, change the actions you're taking, or both, right? And so what I wish, like when I look back at my journey and all the different experiences that I've had of kind of being the black sheep, the heretic, the insane, delusional, pick whatever word you want to describe, right? In all of these journeys and all of these experiences, I was feeling so lost, so like indescribably alone. The like cognitive dissonance is enough to like shatter somebody's brain, not to mention how it just like wrecks your nervous system, right? And most people and most help and support that I found and that I've seen kind of talks about like, yep, that's just kind of part of the process. And it's hard, but it's worth it, and keep going. And I have been, just for my own sake in this journey, being like, no, I don't accept that. I refuse to believe that it just has to be this hard and you just have to deal with waiting for other people to change, to be different, to get it, to allow them to be mad and upset and whatever, that's just how it's going to be. And it's tricky when I describe these things because it's like, I'm also not saying like you can control people, right? Or you can, that you're not going to have to let them just be okay and upset or respond however they want. But it's like, one of the best analogies that I use is coming from an experience when I was a kid. We went boating at this big lake down in southern Utah called Lake Powell. And, you know, you're on this like big inner tube, and this one was like a triangle shape. And I'm on it with a couple of my cousins, and you hold on to it while it's pulled behind the boat, and it's really fun, right? And, you know, you've got your life jacket on, and my parents were telling me, like, okay, whatever you do, don't let go. Like, hold on tight. And I took that to heart. Like, okay, I'm not going to let go so that I'm safe. I'm here on top. Well, then what happened while we were riding is the wake of the boat, right? So it makes really big waves behind it. It turned and our raft went up on the side of the wake instead of just like being smoothly behind it. Now, sometimes you do that on purpose, right? To go, especially if you're going to do like water skiing or wakeboarding or just sometimes fun on the inner tube, right? It's fun to do that. And we were little kids, so they're like keeping us in the more gentle ride in the center, right? But we hit the wake, and when we do, it flips the tube. And my cousins like get flown off and they like, oh, and they like go into the water. But I'm like, I'm gonna hold on. So I stay holding on to the inner tube, right? And I'm now upside down being dragged underneath the water, holding on, right? And until finally I couldn't breathe anymore and I had to let go. And that's when like I popped up out of the water, right? And it's funny because when I started using this analogy, I was going to use it in a different way, but as I'm talking, I'm like, this is often that experience of what it feels like to be the heretic, to like be trying so hard to be like, I'm still holding on. I still think inner tubes are fun and good and right. And like, I want to be a part of this thing. And yet it's like you're being dragged underneath the water. And so many just reach this point of like, I can't breathe anymore and let go. Right? And the moment you do and your head pops back up out of the water, it's like, oh my goodness, such relief, right? And there can be this sense and this feeling of, you know, the only way to feel like you can breathe, feel like you can live, feel like things can be good is if you just let go, right? And sometimes you need to let go in order to flip the inner tube and be able to get back on, right? And continue the ride. So that's a part of the process in some way. Like there has to be a little bit of a detachment that occurs. I'm going to map this out again in that journey. But a lot of people get so traumatized by the experience and so unable to see, how do I take this new version of who I've become and integrate it into this system that doesn't seem to want me there actively, not just like, oh, sure, right? And it's can feel sometimes like this very strong version of gaslighting, whether it's intentional or not, of being like, we value, we care about, we just want to help you, we just want to whatever. And yet the actions seem to be the opposite of that, right? And it messes with the body, with the mind, with the nervous system, trying to deal with that, right? And so I get that feeling and I get that experience, and I get 100% when other people are like, I don't need the boat. I learned to swim. I learned to surf. I learned all these other things. Like, I'm good. Right? And to me, I once had this image of like, the goal of humanity is we're all at sea and we're headed towards this island. Right? We're all moving there. Right? And you have some people who are like holding on to their piece of wood floating there. You have some people who are in rafts. You have some people who are on boats. You have some people in her big ocean cruise liners, right? And speedboats and canoes and all sorts of different vehicles for getting us all to that island, right? And for me, there's value in recognizing like all the other ships in the sea, right? And this singular, intrinsic human divine pull that is moving us forward, right? And at the same time, right, I sit there and I go, I want to be one of those boats that's out there that's like, hey, do you want a faster vehicle? Do you want an easier ride? Do you want a more comfortable one, right? Like maybe somebody's in a canoe or a kayak and they're like, I hate kayaking, but this is the best vehicle I had. It's like, okay, cool. Let's go find you a vehicle that fits better, right? Whereas somebody else is like, I love kayaking, and this is where I want to be. I want to be in my kayak. It's like, awesome. Enjoy your kayak, right? So we've kind of gotten on like a little tangent, but that perspective of just, I guess the points that I'm trying to make in saying this is everyone has their own journey, right? Everyone has their own desires. Everyone has their own way that they're going to be going about things. And the last thing I want to do, because I think it goes against the very nature of the feminine, is to come in and get prescriptive about it, right? Masculine energy is very prescriptive. It's you do this and this and this and this and this, right? Whereas feminine energy is much more, here is the wilderness for you to play in. Go and explore and decide what you want to create and build and make from it, right? And so wanting to honor that and acknowledge that and recognize that, but also at the same time wanting to say the two options that we sometimes feel like there are is stay and struggle and have a really hard time, or leave and live and breathe and like be. And I just am so passionate about saying those are not the only two options. It is entirely possible for you to carve out and craft that path, that experience of what you want your relationship to be. In fact, I am passionate that it is something that simultaneously occurs. Right? Sometimes I feel like we try to detangle all of these problems and we want to get the threads really straight and nice so that then we can come back and start weaving with them something new and better. And in my experience, I found it's you detangle a little bit and then you weave a little, and you detangle a little bit and then you have some more room to weave because it's connected. Like they're not separate. You can't ever break that. And so you build the new as you're deconstructing the old. And sometimes I think our human perspective, we're not sure how to navigate that, how to move through that, how to process that. And that's where it's like, I wish I knew the things I know now back when I was going through all my journeys before of being that heretic and black sheep and whatnot, because now as I'm approaching my journey to be able to talk with people and to show up and to do things that I care about and that I'm passionate about, it's from an entirely different space and a different way. And it's so funny to see, like, I had to heal from some of my trauma from my past experiences in very big ways before I could get to this point, because there were moments where it's like, oh man, round two is coming, it's going to be the same, it's going to be terrible, like I can't go through this again, it was so horrendous before. And being able to recognize, like, I'm a different person, they're a different person, this is a different situation, it gets to be a different situation, like, helped in resolving that, but so did recognizing like I have so many more tools now. I have so many more resources, such a different depth of understanding. Like the way I'm even going to see or approach how I'm going through things is going to be entirely different. But on top of that is also recognizing and acknowledging part of the reason I was so attached, I want to say, to this idea of avoiding being labeled as the heretic or the rebel or the whatever, right? The disobedient daughter, right? Was because there was this deep need to be understood, right? Masculine woundedness often tries to combat that by saying, I need more control, right? I'm going to hold on to more and more control and attempt to make myself feel safe about the situation that I'm not so sure about, right? And the feminine counterpart to that is not so much about trying to gather control as it is about I have this need to be understood, right? And that need to be understood often comes across in interacting with others in a need to educate and inform and like, let me tell you what you're doing wrong and how you're going about this, right? And it's so interesting to see that like a lot of the actions and the things that I would do now in my life and that I did in the past are the same. That you could kind of look at them and be like, I'm still talking or I'm still taking action in these ways or doing these certain things. But the way that I'm going about having those conversations, the way that I'm going about taking that action, and more than that, the state of being that I'm coming from as I'm going about those conversations and as I'm going about having those actions, entirely different. Entirely different. And a huge part of it came from releasing that need to be understood. Because what I did not realize is I thought, well, if somebody understands, then that's what is my key to freedom, right? All of this pain, all of this suffering, all this hardship, all of this discomfort, this tension, this attacking, this whatever that's going on in this relationship dynamic, if they just understood me, it would all go away. All of it, right? But that need to be understood was actually a trauma response coming up of me trying to protect myself, and it was blocking me from the actual key to moving through on these things. And that actual key was the ability to trust myself. Okay? To really, really deeply, truly trust myself. Because when you trust yourself on that level, you trust your connection, your relationship with God, the divine, your higher self, however you want to think about it, right? There's a third piece. It's pretty hard in there. You trust in the inherent intrinsic goodness and good intention of people. When you can get those three things coupled together, it changes the way you approach everything. Right? Because in somebody that you're talking to, they're no longer against you, you're assuming they're for you. So it changes the way you look at them, it changes the way you interact with them, it changes the way you talk with them, it changes the way you connect with them, the way you present things to them, the things you believe are possible in your relationship with them. Right? When you trust deeply in that connection you have with God, the divine source, right? It doesn't matter what's happening in your human physical experience right now, there's a deeper sense and understanding of meaning and purpose of life and vigor that transcends whatever hardship you may be going through right now and gives you that capacity to fuel it. So it's not coming from, the fuel is not from you, right? It's coming from that divine connection. That's what gives you the ability to move forward. In the past, I drained and wrecked my nervous system because I was trying to use my fuel. And I don't have a lot. And I cannot stand up against those things. That connection, limitless, boundless, right? That is the power, the source, the energy that creates worlds. There's so much that it gives us, right? It is that light and life of Christ. And then that third piece, though, an ability to trust yourself. That's the one, as women, we struggle with. And it's not just because of other people or society or culture that's been doing all these things to, whether you want to believe that was intentionally or unintentionally, or maybe a little bit of both, to try and disconnect women from that. Your ability to trust yourself is key to your ability to feel well, happy, whole, functioning, just in every capacity, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. That sense of trust in the self is critical. Okay? What's very interesting is when you map out and understand, again, these journeys of the masculine and feminine, so the feminine starts connected to others and goes on a journey of connecting to herself and then trusting herself, and then learning how to come from that state of trust to connect with herself in a new way. And now that she's connected with herself from a new way that's based in her trust in herself, she connects to her relationships in a new way that is based in her connection to herself, which is based in her ability to trust herself, right? That is the feminine journey. Masculine journey is different. Starts over here in a connection to the self and has to disconnect in order to connect to others, right? And to learn to trust others. And then from that place of trust in others comes to connect with themselves again. And then from there to be able to trust themselves. Right? So it's an opposite journey. And this is also part of the problem that we have in communication and dynamics between the masculine and feminine. Because sometimes the masculine can't even comprehend what is going on with the feminine, because the masculine starts their journey in the connection to themselves. And until they've gone through part of their own process and journey, they have no reference point of what it is to not be connected to that sense of trust in yourself. Okay? We articulate and describe this as like, well, it's because women have been held back, or they haven't had this opportunity, or they don't have this going on, or men get this in their life and women don't get that in their life. Well, yeah, why did the men get that? Why didn't the feminine get that? Because they naturally built it out of how this journey started, of where they were. And because we haven't understood this full process and how to move through it together, right? How to recognize, to validate that there are two different processes that are happening here, that they need to be supported, that both of them have equal value and merit, we're going to kind of continue to spin our wheels. Okay? And so the feminine often will like start going through her journey and then sort of backtrack it, trying to finish it by completing the second half in the way the masculine completes it. But it's inverted and opposite. It's not completing that fullness of it. And it is why trust in the self is critical. Right? And so if you are in a situation right now where you feel like you are the Warder family heretic, and that is something that feels heavy and hard and ripping you and tearing you apart, okay? There's a difference between that feeling and experience and one of, there's a weight here, but it lights you up. It drives you forward. It propels you into wanting to do more. It calls to you. It pulls you, right? Versus tearing you apart, ripping you down, struggling, right? That's the difference. I sometimes hop on here and it's funny because I feel like people will be like, oh, you don't understand the actual hardship or the actual thing that's going on. You're one of these other women who's just stayed in the church, who's never really struggled with this, who's never really had a hard time. You've never been a word heretic. You don't know what it's like. And so you don't understand this piece here. And it's like, no, that understanding, that feeling, I'm not understood, that's something you're regularly projecting out on people. Something to start paying attention to, observing, right? Where is that piece of you that still isn't fully trusting yourself? Right? Trusting that no matter what other people choose or say or do, right, you can stay in that centered space. And that's one piece of it. And the other second piece of it is, again, some of the tangible practical tools for understanding how do you communicate to people? How do you present things? How do you understand what they're saying, what they're meaning? How do you recognize, right, that here's the conversation and the words that we say. Here's the, what I like to call the intangible part, or the undertone of a conversation. right? And the undertone and the words don't always necessarily match, right? But if you learn to read the undertone or the energy of a conversation or an interaction or what's going on, you can often disagree with how they would describe it or the words that they're having, but the underlying sentiment and agreement is like, oh yes, there is common ground here, right? And that changes things, because then you can, instead of feeling like, oh, I have to go against this, I have to go against this, I have to go against this, you can go, oh, you're saying that? I understand what you're saying. Yes, I do agree with that. Even if they're still viewing it in this way, even if they're still talking about it in this way. Okay? So some of the tools that I wish I had known was, one, how critical that process of the feminine journey is, learning to trust myself, letting go of my attachment to them, my need to be understood, learning some of these tools about masculine and feminine communication, understanding different ways of presenting things, as well as understanding power dynamics, especially from an energetic perspective. Why do we sometimes butt heads? Why other times, when are you supposed to hold the line? When are you supposed to push through? When are you supposed to soften and back off? When are you supposed to kind of allow things to happen, right? Navigating that can feel hard, and it can feel like you're either constantly like, having to assert so much on this person and like, oh my gosh, come on, just get it. I'm tired of having to like babysit you and say, no, you need to be doing this, and no, you need this to be happening. Or on the other side, being like, I feel like I'm just giving them all the room in the world and that they're not having to change or do anything different or shift or whatnot, right? There's always two extremes, two ways of doing it wrong. And both of them are pointing to the way of getting it right, that like centered, aligned space. Right? Helping you find that bit was a huge piece of what I loved and learned. So next week, I'm going to be making an announcement that relates way more to this trust bit. And especially as we prepare for a conference in about a month, regardless of what your relationship is with conference, if you have a good time and you get excited about it, if you don't care about it anymore and you're like, I'm kind of done and over it, or if you're somewhere like, it kind of bothers me, I take it year by year, month by month, just kind of see how I'm doing, right? Wherever you are in the experience, I promise this conference, we're going to have an experience unlike any other. We'll be talking about that next week. But in the meantime, I wanted to let you know I'm going to be doing a challenge starting on Tuesday. If you haven't signed up for it yet, there's a link in my bio. Head to my Patreon page. That's where you can sign up for the challenge. It wouldn't let me do it for free. There's a minimum of like, you have to charge $1 for it. So it's a $1 thing, but it's going to be an awesome experience where we're going to help detox from that need to be understood so that you can find that deeper connection to trust in yourself on a whole new level. And when you're in that space, again, it changes the way you show up, the interactions you have, the tangible, like, again, I'm not saying don't have the conversations, don't do the things, don't step out there, don't show up, don't be putting yourself out there. Like, those things are still important, but we want to make sure that the way in which we are doing them comes from a space where it's going to foster the best experience and the best relationship for everyone involved, right? It's kind of, the thought that comes to mind of like, it's one thing to win the battle but lose the war, right? And I feel like that's kind of been a place that has been the repeating theme or pattern overall. And it's like, it's time to be like, we can lose a battle or two. It means winning the war. And part of that is learning, what do we need to do? How do we shift things? How do we do things differently? So if you're interested, you want to learn more about this journey of the masculine and the feminine and the masculine, how to trust yourself, how to detox from that need to be understood, come check out the challenge on Tuesday. It's going to be a great experience, and stay tuned for next week's announcement, because guys, this is going to be good. This is going to be, I think, the thing all of us are needing. And even if nobody else comes and does it, I'm so excited for it, because it's one of those things with like, you create your own medicine and then you share it with others. And it's like, this is the medicine that I'm so ready for, that I need. And I know I'm not the only one feeling these ways. And so I think it's going to be a really beautiful experience for a lot of us. So I hope you'll join us. Stay tuned and have a wonderful rest of the day.